Hello, welcome back to another episode of Tech Life Stories. On the podcast today, I'm joined by Valerie Wilson. Valerie is a ITIL Strategic Leader, currently working as the Service Operations Director for BT. She's had a squiggly career working at BT for the past 22 years. Board member at the ITSMF and currently launching Women in ITSM Community of Practice. I hope I've done you justice there,
Oh
Val.
yeah, very good indeed.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
good intro. We'll take that. Okay, that's a good start at least. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
You're welcome. Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it. No, not a problem at all. I always like to kind of my first question on every podcast is how did you get into technology? You know, was it a chosen career path, or was it something you kind of fell into?
Yeah, I think it's probably, well, I suppose it is a bit of a falling into, but a little bit of both. So I think whenever I went to university and did a degree in accountancy and economics, so it's not really like computing or anything really technology related per se. And I think my aim was always to try and get into a graduate scheme. I always wanted,
Mhm.
a corporate, graduate scheme of some description. So applied for all the sort of the usual ones that you would expect. And I was lucky enough, I suppose, to fall into BT. So to that nature, it was by accident, but I was quite focused on trying to get into BT at the time. I felt it was a good company. I remember even at university, but back in the days when there wasn't so much access to the internet, you had like the Financial Times and it was always on offer in the
Yeah,
student union. And I used to
yeah,
always check to see if BT, the companies at the front, if they were listed. And if they were listed,
yeah.
I bought it and I would cut out the wee, the wee article and build up a wee
I like
dossier.
it.
I know, like a Sado, and build up this wee dossier of BT because I was really keen to try and get in to BT at the time. And it's funny, I'd wanted to go to London. As you can hear from my accent, I'm from Northern Ireland. And I wanted to go to the big smoke in London, and I applied for, I think it was finance, really boringly in London. And I actually didn't make it through the assessment centre. I didn't pass. And then they phoned me a week later and said, like, oh, we'd like you to invite you to a Belfast one. I says, oh, I've already done one in London. Oh no, this is different. And luckily it was the same assessment centre but in Belfast. So I was able to bring
Okay.
all of not just my ideas, but anyone else in my group in London's ideas to the assessment centre. So luckily I got in through that way, which was brilliant, I have to say. And I've been here ever since, as you say, indeed.
Wow, I'm impressed. So that first role that you got as a grad, so that was finance, was it?
No, so when I went into BT, I actually was in consumer, so 150. So if you have a problem with any of your phones at home, any of your residential phone or broadband, you would phone 150 on your number, and I would have been responsible for a team of individuals who would deal with complaints for
Okay.
consumers in BT, but very much thrown in the first couple of months leading a team of people. So obviously I was 21, I think, at the time. Excuse me, and trying to lead a team of 20 people when you're 21, obviously in BT the tenure of service is quite high, so you very quickly had to come to terms with that. So you wouldn't maybe necessarily call that technology per se. And then I did a number of different roles within BT, and I've probably been in this more service management community for the last 10 years, 10 or 11 years, and I've really enjoyed working in this. I always sort of laugh that if I was to go a mastermind, I probably wouldn't have a specialist subject, whereas I feel now that I've been in service
You would.
management for about 10 years of my
Yeah.
tenure in BT. I feel like, yeah, I could have a specialist subject in that at last, as opposed to
Uh,
a lot of moving around different roles. So yeah.
But obviously, it sounds like obviously you went in. You was in this complaints role. You were managing people. Um, so because I think before you've mentioned to me, I think you've had like up to 14 different roles in,
Yeah.
in your time at BT. So you've had a really very kind of like um, different skill sets and different roles.
hmm
Do you think that that's helped you in to get into where you are in the service community?
Oh, very, very much so. I think that's the beauty about being in a company like BT, where you have
Hmm.
loads of different, effectively, jobs within the same company. And I think
Yeah,
sometimes people go, it is sort of rare nowadays where people have been in the same company. And believe me, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here.
yeah.
But to be honest, I've never felt the need to seriously look elsewhere.
Hmm.
And that's because you can look within BT and change your direction very quickly. So most of my roles, and as you say, I've probably done about 14, 15 different roles. Most of my roles have been more operational leadership roles, but I've done a few more what we call maybe strategic roles or financial budget sort of roles as well, but mostly that leading large teams of people across different areas and different geographies as well. But what I find in BT is it's so easy to, once you're in it, it's quite difficult to get into a company like BT, but once you're in, it's really, there's so many opportunities for maneuvering into different parts of it. So for example, like as I say, I worked in more of the complaints, I've worked in nuisance call bureau, I've worked in, well, I suppose it's now openreach, so managing field engineers, I've worked in billing, I've worked in repair, as well, sort of more your more consumer and business repair. I've done budgets for property, I've done customer experience, and then I've done any type of role within the service management role, across, your sort of service desks, your ITIL functions, of course, as well. So yeah, I've done a real variety. I've been very, very lucky, I have to say, with my career in BT for sure. So yeah, so it's been good.
Yeah, I think, like you said earlier on, it's very rare these days to get someone
Mm,
to be with the same company for many years. And like you said, you wouldn't be there if you didn't want to be. So you want to be there, which is great. Obviously, they look after you.
hmm
Um, and another thing that's just come to my mind was you mentioned when you went in, you was doing the complaints role and you was leading a team of people of about 20 people. How did you get that responsibility quite quickly early on in your career? Did you want that, or did they see something in you that they felt that you could manage people? What was the
Yeah.
decision process then?
So I think it's probably a bit of both there. I think that the way typically BT hire from the graduate scheme is people that typically have those sort of traits that are more leadership than maybe techies, more that all round type of individual. And I think at university I had done quite a bit of, I was into the officer training, so potentially back to my military background. So I had been used to being responsible for individuals and people. And it's funny, whenever I was in BT about a year and a half, I went to Sandhurst with the reservists, so the sort of territorial army, the reservists. So I went for 3 weeks and did my Sandhurst course, which is your officer training, your formal officer training. And I did well on my course, I did really well on my course. Actually, I got the Cane of Honour. And when I came back from that, they thought, oh my goodness, this girl can clearly manage men, and they put me
Yeah,
in to manage then the field engineers, and I was the first female field engineer manager, of a team of about maybe 20 or 30 engineers who were all, let's say over 50 at the time. So, that was a big challenge. And at the time, that was seen as a big move to have a young female, not just a female, but someone who was very young.
yeah,
But very much that was driven from their view that I could manage men because of my military background and experience, which I can see the link there for sure. And they actually, because it was seen as a bit of a taboo at the time, they actually brought back a senior manager to work alongside me for a period of 4 months. So this senior manager had obviously been in engineering for a long, long time and left the business, and they brought him back as a contractor, basically to mentor me for 4 or 5 months, which was really good, and but nowadays that would be unheard of. You really wouldn't have that, but it just shows that
yeah.
they wanted to make sure it was a success, and they wanted to give me the help and support that they felt I needed, to be able to do that role, which was brilliant. But ultimately, I have found throughout my career, it's been typically external factors that have helped me maneuver my career or move about my career, or something has happened that has then facilitated a move quite nicely. And typically those things are something outside. So like that's a good example there of the Sandhurst and the officer training. But also in work, there was we call it like a challenge cup. It's an internal, you know, competition, where you have to improve something for the customer experience. You submit your entry, there's thousands of entries, and then, there's a winner right at the end of it. And you get like the winning prize. It's amazing. We went to Portugal, for all expenses paid trip. You have all of your chief executives there, and you do your presentations, about what you've done. So it's a big deal internally. And again, the team I was on and led, we won one year. And again, on the back of that, that facilitated another move in my career where someone had seen you and went, oh, she sounds pretty good, knows what she's talking about. I want to move her into my team. So there was quite a little bit of that. And I find typically it's the standout thing that you do outside of the day job that gives you a bit more
Hmm.
visibility. and wider that helps within the day job. And then equally, I have three beautiful daughters, so I'm very focused on that. But so I had obviously three maternity leaves as well. And each time I was on maternity leave, I would try and come back and use that as an opportunity to do something different. And I know for a
Mhm.
lot of females coming back to work, and this is understandable, typically your confidence can be a little bit lower because you've been off work for 9 months, as or whatever length of time you've been off for. But I always use this as an opportunity to go, right, actually, it's very rare your list of things to do is zero when you go back to work. Normally, you've got so many things on and so many projects on that sometimes it's hard to think of the next move because you're so busy in the moment dealing with your role. Whereas actually, I find when you go back, the team aren't used to you being there. There's somebody else has been covering for that length of time you've
Mhm.
been off. It's actually a nice segue if you can have the right conversations with your line manager or indeed apply for the right roles on the come up to you coming back. And I did that with each of my three maternities. I use that as an opportunity to try and again maneuver into another role, which I find for me worked really well actually.
Mm.
But I appreciate
Mm.
not everyone will work like that. But I think some people's mindsets don't even think like that at all. They just think
Yeah.
go back to something safe, go back to something straightforward, something that when you're going back in in a bit more of a difficult time of your life with young babies.
Yeah.
But I was very much, this is the perfect time to do something different, and that held strong for me too. And even then, I suppose more recently, I felt like because I'd been in BT for so long, for 23 years, I felt quite insular a lot of the time, and I felt like my external network maybe wasn't great. And as you get more senior, that does become more important, your external network and who you know in the industry. So I think maybe, right, it must be 4 years ago now, I took a real focus on external, and how do I get involved with the industry?
Mhm.
And I got involved then in IT service management UK, ITSMF UK, and then subsequently has been on the board now for over 3 years on that. And I have really enjoyed that, I've got to be honest. And it has really increased my network, my friends, I would say as well, and also my knowledge too on what's going on in the industry. But equally, I think it's also helped BT because whenever I'm doing things, I'm doing it on behalf of BT. I'm talking about BT. If I'm doing
Yeah.
an external speech on something or an external pitch on something, I'll very much be putting BT in a good light. So I see it as very much being good for BT as well as
Mhm.
being good for me as an individual. And then that helped me to get my director post internally as well. I would very much see that external viewpoint as being critical internal to moving on. So I think you can, when you look back at it, you can really see the touch points or the specific things in your career that help facilitate those moves, as well as obviously having a lot of support, internally and people seeing maybe what you don't always see in yourself and helping to facilitate those allyships that you have over the years also really played a big part as part of my career. So I've been very, very fortunate as part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about the free maternity leaves that you took because,
Mm.
like you said, I think most individuals would probably want to go back to a safe type role and
Yeah.
slowly work their way back into. But you the opposite. You
Yeah.
you wanted a new
I
role,
know.
fresh start each time. But that's worked for you, right?
Yeah.
That seems to
Mm.
have worked. That seems to have worked really well for you. So you would encourage individuals who are going through a maternity leave to consider if they've got the option to apply for other roles and have a fresh start,
I would.
that you would recommend that. Yeah.
I would. I think, particularly in the same company, and I know not everyone's company they work in is maybe big enough or whatever, but if you've got the opportunity to do it, and I think having those conversations with your line manager at the time are really important because if they know where your head's at, like if you're off for 6, 9, 12 months, a lot can happen in your organization over that period and a lot of things. And if they have a seed or something in their brain that knows actually this individual's open to moving and open to wanting to do something different, and you have those conversations throughout that time you're off, then it's amazing how things can fall into place and help facilitate that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really good opportunity to come back and do something new, particularly when you haven't been in post and someone else has been doing it. It's a nice. Not very often you get that opportunity in life, to have that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Like you say, I think the size of your organisation matters, and the fact that you've been there for so long probably works in your favour
Yep,
as well. I would have thought.
I agree.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah, let's talk about the current role
Mhm.
because, or let's talk about IT service management. For the past 10 years, you said obviously it's a bit more of a specialisation area for you. And I know we've had in our pre-chat, we spoke about. I think you manage what 1,500 people
Yeah,
globally. Is that
about
right?
that, yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, and can you just tell us a bit more about that? And what is that? Just service desk? What's involved with that? And I think we touched on there's lots of different kind of like cultures across that globally, and how
Mhm.
that's managed because that must be quite tough actually.
Yeah, so yes, it's about sort of roughly sort of 1,300, 1,500 people across the globe. So very much the area I look after is the service desks. So
Hmm.
as I said before, I've done ITIL, I've done to the two and all the different areas before, but now I'm very much focused on operations. So it's the service desk and also the major incident management function for our SINs. And in BT, it's very much the managed services side of the house. So we would have probably about 5 or 6 thousand customers. They're not your sort of normal customers. Well, they are as well, but you're very talking about all your big customers, really, all your sort of important aspects, not just of the UK, but of the globe. So you're thinking your blue lights, your hospitals, you're thinking your nuclears, you're thinking, your airlines, anything, your banks, financial, anything at all, really, that's important, And I always think whenever I go to wake up and go to work in the morning, all the touch points you have, typically my team somewhere, will have a foot in the door on that for sure. So yeah, it's very much running the front end service desk for all of those teams. We have a number of centres across the globe. We have 4 key ones in the UK, and then our other main countries that I would be responsible for would be Hungary and India, with a smaller footprint probably in the wider Europe and China as well. So very much a broader team. And actually, in the last sort of 6 months, we've brought to get together our UK division effectively and our global division into one effectively business division. So it's almost been like a coming together of two worlds,
Yeah,
into that. So it's been quite different, in that sense, and a lot more travel than I'm
yeah,
maybe used to. I'm used to quite a fair bit of travel in many different roles, but yeah, like I was in Hungary a couple of weeks ago. I would typically go to India maybe 3 times a year, but typically like because I've got 3 young kids, I don't like to be away for. I would never be away for more than a week. Never be away for more than a week, and even at that,
yeah.
it's tight. It's tight, and you're flat out, you're landing and going straight to the office, that way, on it. Whereas other people have a bit more luxury to go a bit longer. I'm very much, if I can do it in 3 or 4 days, I'll do it, or
Got
if
it
I
done.
can do it in
Yeah,
a long day, I'll do it in a long day to try and not be away from home as much as I can. But yeah, it's a brilliant role. Operations is very much my first love. Very much what I really enjoy doing. I'm one of these people that is always on, therefore it suits to that
okay.
extent. I'm well ingrained in keeping an eye on things at all times, but it's a very challenging role and one that's a really important role in society in general, and I take great pride in the work that our teams do for the customers and making sure that we do it really well as well. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to, let's say, those teams in Hungary and India,
Hmm.
how do you, because all the cultures are different, right? So
Yeah.
how do you ensure that, I suppose, you're getting best in class across the different teams, the different cultures, and I suppose trying to have the same kind of similarities between the different countries as best as possible.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so we've got a big program, what we call One Way of Working. Oh wow, we call it One Way of
Oh
Working.
wow!
I know
Okay, okay.
exactly, and yeah, there's so many nuances and differences between all the different teams and how they work. And I'm not one of these people that's hell bent on going, everything must be the same. If you do it like this in London, you must do it like this in Calcutta in India,
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, right, the principles and the overarching process should be the same. And with customers that we work with, some of their SLAs and what have you are very bespoke, right? So therefore it can't
Hmm.
be the same, and you've got to work within the refines of the contract as well. But you do have some of your broad basics, like your quality. You expect the quality to be a certain level and certain standard each time. You expect, the communication to the customer to have a similar template, a similar feel, regardless of whether you're in London or if you're in Calcutta. You expect the same follow-up from an incident point of view, regardless. So we work more on the broader, wider principles of your overarching process of incident management and escalation management and hierarchy management. And we try and make sure we're having that consistency across the board, because actually some of the skills are different depending on where you go, because the contracts are different depending on the technology that they're supported by the customers in each of the centre. So one size doesn't fit all, and I think that mentality won't get you anywhere. You have to be able to be
Yeah,
flex around it, but that overarching piece and that overarching leadership and vision and strategy needs to be the same no matter where you are. And I think, as much as I'm getting used to the cultures, I think the cultures are getting used to me as well, in terms of my leadership style and on how I am. And I'm probably a wee bit unique in that I'm very much the same person no matter who I'm talking to. So I'm talking to, the person on the desk versus somebody who's two levels higher than me, I will be the same person regardless, of that.
yeah,
And I don't think everyone's used to that, particularly more when you go to the global ones in India or Hungary. I would very much just sit down and talk to everyone and do sit-bys and be very hands-on when I do my visits. And very what I would call normal, or what they would call normal.
Mhm.
And um,
Yeah,
and I think that mentality isn't always there. You don't get, I think they're used to, maybe if you're a director or someone senior, they swan in and swan out, that way. Whereas I'd be very much trying to build relationships, at all levels, trying to understand from the ground up what's
yeah,
going on, what the problems are, and then taking that away. And I think that they're not used to that, particularly more so I find in the global arenas versus the UK aspect. But yeah, you do have to be aware of the cultural differences, particularly probably more so in India, and the different holidays and festivities and celebrations. And I try and learn more about them and try and, make sure I mention as many as I can, on the different meetings that we do, etc., and be mindful of that. And even from a gender point of view as well, whenever we're doing, women's network events in different countries, there's a different nuance there as well, in terms of
yeah,
expectations for females as well. And sometimes you've got to lean in more there to help, for some of those countries as well. But yeah, it's really exciting. But at the heart of it all, we've got teams of people who want to do really great things for customers, who are really engaged, and who are coming to work every day to do a fantastic job. So those principles are the same regardless, and it's just about, as you say, how do we get the consistency across the board on that, from a training, a skills, process point of view. And it's picking the right ones, so picking them bit by bit and then making sure we roll that out. But like, I've been doing it now 6 months, and I think it's going to be a 12, 18-month program, really, because you can't do everything all at once. You got to pick the important things and then pick the next ones, and then go with it from there. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned your clients, because earlier when you said it's blue lights, hospitals, nuclear,
Mhm.
finance, banks, you've got a wide variety there, but quite some of those are quite critical, right?
Yeah.
Clients, so
Hmm.
a lot of pressure on you and your team
Yeah.
to deliver. So I know you mentioned process training, but how do you ensure you and your team are getting kind of that you are delivering best in class for those clients of yours?
Yeah. So there's probably a few things there on it, and it does. That's why I'm getting a bit grey haired, I think, at this stage in my life, with all this, and particularly having the major incident managers as well, on that front too. I think for us, particularly in the contracts that we deal with, as much as I'm biased and I'll tell you, oh, we do this and we do that, and it's really great, for us, the external verification is important, and a lot of the certifications, we would be quite heavily certified and regulated. I'm going to say regulated is probably not the right word, but more certified. So, for example, like your ISOs for us effectively are your bread and butter, your ISO 20K is 27001, 22301, business continuity. For us, even to bid for some of our contracts, they're just, you have to, and it doesn't mean they're easy, right? Just to be clear, it's the minimum requirement for us. And we've
Yeah,
done, probably, I'd say maybe a few years ago, we thought, right, what else can we do to make sure, not only that we're doing what we need to be doing, but also it's good to get feedback. I find when we do these external audits, we get really great feedback, as well around continual improvement and how can we do things better. So I suppose the other ones that we would weigh quite heavily on would be CMMI. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but it's a
Yeah, I've
maturity
heard of it. Yeah.
appraisal from ISACA, and we did it 3 years ago, and NASA would hang their hat on that one. So we thought if it's good enough for
Okay.
NASA, it's good enough for
Yeah.
us to know in BT. And very much the difference between it and your ISOs is it looks over a 2 year period. So it's all about the maturity of your organization as opposed to maybe more
Yeah.
point in time. And we've just recertified on that one quite recently. So that was a bit, and we were the first company in the UK to get that one 3 years ago. And then we
Nice.
also would do a lot with the Service Desk Institute as well, so
Mm.
SDI. And we
Yeah.
find, again, with those wider audits, they cover all the processes, and we sort of felt we needed something specifically for Service Desk that was a bit more, you know, specific, and the surrounding ITIL functions that go with that. So we have a 4-star multi-site certification in that. Again, we were the first company in the UK to have that one. And then the final one that we did was the ITIL 4 maturity. So this is
Hmm.
with ITSMF, whereby whenever the new standard came out, we were measured against the new level 4, the version 4, and we have a level 3 maturity in that. So typically, whenever I do customer visits and customer tours, which are, every week I would have customers in, we have like a certification wall, so we have like the 8 or 9 certifications you can imagine, on it. And I always say, like, there's probably about 300 audits a year, are done across all of those different certifications across the different hubs.
Yeah.
If you don't believe me so much, we can go and you can talk to any auditor who has been in and seen us, and you can read their reports and you can see the commentary that's coming back. And for us, it's as much as about that service assurance, so to your point, how do you know? Well, I know what I know, but also here's all these other external people who've come in and verified and checked. Now, it doesn't mean we'll be perfect, can all the time, far from it. I'm not suggesting we're perfect, but what it does, it means that we are adhering to best practice, and we're adhering to what's happening in the industry. And not only that, we're getting regular feedback from those individuals that we can look to improve and make sure that we are doing it. If there is any gaps there, it'll definitely be picked up as part of that. And that's something is really important for us. And I suppose equally the professionalization of our people, and making sure our people and our staff are certified as well. Like we would have probably maybe a luxury for some other companies, but we would have a very healthy training budget and learning budget, and we would invest very heavily in our people and our staff in terms of certification, whether that be your ITIL, or your ITIL certifications, or indeed your technical, or indeed your cyber ones, security ones, project management ones, whatever it happens to
Yeah.
be. But we expect individuals to be certified in the discipline that they are in. So we have got it almost at all angles, from that point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we try our best, given the level of some of the customers. And I know there's been many a night where I've been up on major incidents, and they're getting quite serious, and you're getting, you're getting the press office involved for different things there. So yeah, and it's times like that when it really hits home that what you do is so important, and when something does go wrong,
Very much so.
it
Yeah.
it really can go wrong, and it's not, and it's proper, like, lives could be at risk, do you know that way? So it is important,
Yeah.
and it really hits home, and you're like, right, this is important, and our teams know it's important, and therefore we need to have all of that level of governance and discipline there to be able to make sure that we don't, fall foul of that effectively. So yeah.
Yeah. No, no, no. Just what you and your team do, and the clients you support is fantastic, and a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's what gets you out of bed every day, right? Like you
Yeah,
say,
that's
that
it.
it's yeah, yeah, 100%. So I
Hmm.
get it. And you touched on something else. You touched on the ITSMF, and I know earlier when you mentioned about building your network, and you've become a board member there.
Hmm.
How did that happen? How long's it been? What type of involvement's involved with that?
Yeah, so I suppose we were always members from a BT perspective. We've always sort of paid, the corporate membership for it. And I think, I suppose from my earlier point, I did consciously go, right, I want to get a bit more involved externally, and they run elections, every so often for board members. So I suppose naively, I thought, oh, I'll just apply for this. This will be fine. And the first time I applied, I didn't get on, and rightly so, because to be fair, I hadn't been involved. It was a random stranger. Do you know what I mean? Just going,
Yeah.
I'd like to be on the board. I've got a pretty decent title. Pick me, and didn't get on. And I think that was the right thing. So what I did was I tried to get a bit more involved in the community first of all. Go along to some of the events, go along to some of the seminars, the webinars, etc. And then probably I think it was maybe 9 months later, a similar opportunity came up. So again, I felt a bit more, I suppose, comfortable, a bit more known, that way, that it would be okay at the job, and went in for it, and was fortunate enough to be elected into the board, which is fantastic. And I've got to be honest, I was really nervous about it. And you do get a bit of imposter syndrome going on, whenever you're sitting externally on a board representing, your industry and trying to do the right thing, to move the industry forward. But I think everyone has that. And I think in reality,
They do.
everyone has that. And do you know what?
Yeah.
You're just as good as anybody else when you go on those. If you're engaged, you're trying to do the right things, and you're being proactive, that's all people want. And the thing is, you're volunteering your time. So a lot of the time that I spend doing that would be in my own time. So the meetings
Hmm.
for the board are in the evenings. They're
Hmm.
usually 6, 7 at night. They usually have only one face to face a year, maybe two, at a max. So that would be when it encroaches a little bit more on work time. And I would run the events. So basically, I have like a number of what we call like champions or chairs for each of the regions in the UK. So it's about
Hmm.
10, maybe 8 to 10, and we have like a monthly call again, sort of done at the end of the day. Where we work out, well, what events do we want to run? What's happening in the industry? How can we give back to the communities that we have? What communities of practice do we think would be worthwhile? What are the points of interest that people are talking about? And therefore, how do we, I suppose, make sure our members get good value for money, and feel like they are learning and gaining insight and knowledge in the industry as part of that. So I have a great team of people there who help excuse me, with the events over a 12-month period. And yeah, so I would do my own events as well, and do some speaker events as well. But it's a really, really good team, I have to say. And then we're very well supported by the office there, who have their full-time employment employees. And they're great, so they do a lot of the logistics in the background, as part of that as well. But I have really found it useful. I've got to be honest, really found it useful. And this, as I say, this is my third year. I think of another year to do in this role, and then I'll see what I decide to do next. Whether I stay in ITSMF and do a slightly different role on the board, or whether I'll decide maybe to go and do something different with another similar industry. But I really feel like having that external board experience helps no end with my role in work and my own personal career as well, and your own network, too.
Yeah. So I suppose the question I was going to ask was, but prior to you joining ITSMF,
Hmm.
um, where where you were previously to where you are now, what's the impact that's had on you in your career and your network now? What's the difference that that's made?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. I think number one, I feel like I know what's happening more in the industry, right? I feel like
Hmm.
I know what the trends are. I feel like I would know before 95% of people I work with, because they're not looking externally, or they're not reading or watching or listening or going on the seminars or podcasts, and finding out more about that. So I think very much my own knowledge, and then what I feel I can do is I can bring that into my job in BT, and therefore BT can be a bit ahead of the game, as
Yeah.
part of that. So I feel
Yeah.
it helps BT as well, because I can go, right, this is what's going on in the industry. We need to get moving this direction. Like XLAs is a good example, your experience level agreements, you
Yeah.
know, like we would be really pushing that, from a forefront. And I think realistically, if you're not looking externally and you're not seeing and hearing and understanding that, that could miss you by, and like we've been doing that now for a year and a half. Definitely whenever we were first getting involved in that, there wasn't too many other big corporates that were thinking like that. So I think first, there's definitely that side of it. I think from my own network point of view, I do feel like, and I'm not saying I would ever leave, or if something happened that I had to leave BT, I feel like I genuinely have a good core network of people in the industry, that I could call friends,
Yeah.
that way, that you could reach out to and get help or a reference or something, that way, to find another role. And I think that's a danger when you've been in a company for so long that you don't have
Hmm.
that. So if something did happen for whatever reason and you wanted to make a move, or you don't have a choice and you have to move, and as part of that, you know, that network is really important,
Yeah.
for you. So I definitely feel that's also helped. And I think even from a mentorship point of view and community of practice, you just know more people who know more stuff than you
Yeah.
typically, and then you can
Yeah.
you can collaborate, use their ideas, and bring them back into your job. That's what we all do. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
all work in different companies, and it's that consistency and that community that people do. And I love the way people share case studies and share, about, well, I had this problem and this is how I dealt with it and this is what we did. And 9 times out of 10, I have that problem, you've that problem, we've all that problem, and it really
Yeah.
helps. And I would be a great one for listening to podcasts, and every time I go for a walk with my dog, I just put on a podcast, and
Same here.
I know I am. We're so sad, aren't we? And even into work, I,
Yeah.
I listen to. I'm so sad, and I really I would be a big advocate, particularly of industry ones, that are relevant to your job.
Yeah.
That's why I really love those, and finding the right nuggets and then giving them to other people. But it's just so rare that people do that, and I think everyone's busy, right? As I always say, everyone's busy, but we can find time to do things like that in our day-to-day life. If you said to me, Val, have you got an hour to do this? No, I don't. But am I going for a walk with the dog? Yes. Am I driving home? That takes an hour? Yes.
Yeah.
So if you build it into your routine, it's amazing how you can get those nuggets of information, but you're using it for your advantage, do you know what I mean, in your job at work. And I think that's
Yeah.
really
100%.
important for people.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. And we previously spoke about you helping with the launch of Women of ITSM as part of
Hmm.
ITSMF.
Yeah. Hmm.
Where you at with that? What's
Yeah.
involved? If anyone's listening in,
Yeah.
how can they
Yeah.
get involved as well?
Yeah, so I know there's a couple of different ones that have come up in the industry recently, which is fantastic, and we've been chatting to other people about this as well. But effectively, it's for members in IT service management community. We're creating a community of practice for, well, effectively support females. You don't have to be female, to be honest. Like, obviously, male allyship is equally as important. But we have our inaugural event in September. I think it's the 26th of September, but you can find it on the website. But funny, we launched it a couple of weeks ago, and the response was amazing. Like, the biggest response we have had in terms of sign-ups. In the first 3 hours, we had more sign-ups than we've had really for any other event, and I think that speaks volumes of
Yeah,
where we are as an industry. And also, like, as this topic of females, in IT, just females in general, and equality and all of those things, and diversity, like, they are key trends for everywhere, and I do feel in ITSMF we had a bit of a gap there, in terms of
hmm,
that. I chaired something for International Women's Day. We had a panel, I chaired it, and we had a great response to that. And actually, whenever we're looking to talk to new members and new people who come on board, it's something that they're looking for their females in the industry, particularly for
yeah,
those smaller companies where there's maybe not a lot of females in there. So this is the wider community that will come together probably about once a quarter, and then we'll have informal that community, so if people have issues or concerns, they can throw it into the community and we can help each other as part of that. But yeah, so really excited about that. I've got to be honest, really excited, looking forward to that. And we have a great speaker, Anna Limperia, who I worked with on another course called Speak You, Speak Easy, which is all about presenting, and presenting yourself in the right way. And she is a fantastic lady, and she's going to be running the first seminar around imposter syndrome and very topical issues and building your confidence, that we would typically find that would help females in the industry. So yeah, so really, really looking forward to it.
and that's in September.
It is indeed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so, if someone wanted to come along to that, where would they go
Yeah,
to
so if you
sign up?
if you go to ITSMF website, or
Hmm.
indeed if you look up my LinkedIn, I think I posted a couple of weeks ago, there, or on LinkedIn for ITSMF UK as well, you get it there.
Okay, good, good. Okay, and let's just stay with women in tech in general,
Hmm.
because it's still a subject where I think people still feel passionate that we're still not attracting enough people coming in, or women coming
Mm.
into technology, into the IT sector. Um, what's your view on that, and like how do you see the future to attract more women into IT?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it's so much it is a society thing. Do you know what I mean? It's right for
Yeah,
whenever your kids are young and you know your kids are growing up, and I think more and more, if you were to look at now at probably your split going into universities with those more IT worlds, I think the split is definitely better than what it was 20 years ago. And I don't
yeah,
think like all these things isn't going to change overnight. You know, it's definitely moving in the right direction for sure. Um, it's a tricky one, but I do feel that people think whenever they're talking about service management, they think you need to be a techie. Do you know? And I think there's so much more to service management than being a techie. In fact, I would say there's
yeah,
more to it than not being a techie. You know, and
yeah,
there's so many roles that are available that females would thrive in, you know, really, really thrive in, like your process orientated roles, like your service design, your client services, like your project management. There's so much there that I think people, whenever they think IT, you say, "Would you want to go into IT?" They think, "Oh, do I want to go into coding, or do I want to go into, you
yeah,
know, being a network specialist?" And for a lot of females, you know that's not what floats their boat. You know, with the best
yeah,
will in the world. But I think if you were to say, "Do you want to be a project manager, or do you want to be a leader, or do you want to work in process?" The answer would be different. And I think sometimes we focus a bit too much on IT, and rather than educating about the industry of particularly of service management. And I know some of the initiatives that ITSMF are working on is how do we get that, I suppose, visibility in the education system. Do you know how to, like, I personally would love, can you imagine an A level in service management or a degree in service management? You could almost write the course. Do you know there's a module in this, a
yeah,
module, couldn't you? And I think it would be a really great career for someone to come in, have done, a degree in it, and then you walk into then a really good professional job with loads of opportunity to move. And I think that's part of the reason why I've stayed in it for 10 years, because there is, you can have a whole career within service management and do different jobs. And I think there's so many roles in there that females don't know about, that we need to talk a little bit wider than just talking about IT. And I think it's that education that we need to get in at the lower end of that education system for sure. But it's a difficult one. And I think even, like, I know in our workplace, when you have on the service desk tends to be the best split, and then as you move out, it gets less. And I think we've tried to focus more from the technical point of view. How do you move a female from service desk into the more technical roles in networks or voice or data or cyber? How do you encourage them? So we have a few women only, programs that help
mhm,
facilitate that, where you do have to nurture and help, and it's all about that equity. How do you give them that step up maybe that they need, or that encouragement that they need to do that? But it is difficult, to bring them in externally. And we have a number of rules now where, you have to have like 50-50 in terms of your applications for roles. And if you don't have a 50-50 gender split, you have to extend the job advert. And there's lots of things like that that are coming in that I think will help females,
mhm,
to progress, and having diverse panels, having your job descriptions written to have more inclusive language, having
yeah,
more part-time roles. Like, I had a workshop about that on Friday. Could we make every role part-time? You know, so whenever you're going for LinkedIn, and you have it part-time or full-time, and have
yeah,
that conversation. Now, not every job can be done 15 hours a week, but if you're talking like 30 hours a week, you could do a full-time job. You could do that and make that work. And recognizing that a lot of females like to have, that option of part-time, particularly when you come back from having children, etc. You maybe don't want to work the full time, but you want to work part-time, and you want to work in a good job, as
mhm,
well. So it's trying to have that balance. I think all of those things will help, but it's going to take time. But the good thing is everyone's talking about it, right? The good news
yeah.
is it's the buzzword at the minute. 5-10 years ago, it would have been a taboo word, whereas now everyone is leaning into that. So I think it's only going to get better, and it's only going to improve.
Yeah. You mentioned some real key golden nuggets for me there. One was obviously getting in early into the education
Mm,
system, really, because I think that's a piece where uh, it probably really lacks some maturity around explaining the different types of roles, particularly not, like you say, they're not all coding type roles, right? So
Yeah.
um, how that happens, I don't know. But the more we talk about it, hopefully someone will step up to the plate and make some changes there. And for me, we need people like you that will, who will bang the drum still, right?
Mm.
We need senior women. It doesn't have to be senior women, but just women in general who are setting up these groups, these communities now where women feel confident to join a group, know that they're one of many that are in a program like that or in a community like that, and they're going to be supported.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, uh, keep doing what you're doing with the community. I know
Mm-hmm.
it's only just about to launch, but I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I think it will only help women going forward 100%.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Um, so I also want to. You did mention it earlier on, and we haven't touched on this, but you've come from like a military type background, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, just talk me through that a little bit. And I know you said that I think you've been to Iraq before,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got untapped resource, with like military. Talk to me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I suppose I was always a bit of a tomboy for want of a better word, and always into
Okay.
all that sort of. So I did air cadets at school and did officer training cadets at university, and as I said earlier, went to Sandhurst, and I always thought about a full-time career in the army, and then thought, oh no, I want to have, for me, I wanted to work professionally as well. So for me, I always sort of went down more the reservist route. And as you said, I went to Iraq in 2005, many, many moons ago now, and I was a captain out there. And I left in '07 actually, so it's a long, long time ago now. But I do. I do have a strong affiliation, with people in any type of military role. And again, post similar to the other the women, there's a community practice that we have, for people that are leaving the military, and
Mhm.
really trying to encourage them into roles in service management. And like I would do workshops, and for people that are leaving around their CVs, trying to help and guide them to where it needs to go. And I think, in this industry we're in now, there's just so many skills that are transferable, from the military. Even thinking about like security clearance, there's so many roles now, particularly like in companies like ourselves, where we need people that are ability to have security clearance, and if you have that military background, it's so much easier. You either have it or
Yeah.
you've just had it and it's lapsed, and it saves, maybe 9 months or 12 months that it can take to do security clearance. And even thinking about things like your major incident and being calm under pressure, and that command and control that's totally ingrained in you and trained in you, as an individual, that default mode is there naturally. Like, to have
Yeah.
people like that working in service management is perfect. And even thinking of like your security and your cybersecurity skills, and even like your ISO 27001, I think, is always a great one for ex-military. People that are the people that say no all the time, let's just say, around security, that way, no, you can't do that. No, you
Yeah.
can't do that. You have to do it this way. You have to do it that way. Here's another way. That type of individual is perfect for that role. And even just your basics of working in a team, communication skills, turning up on time, your basic stuff that you think would be straightforward to get, wouldn't you? I always think when you have a military CV in front of you, you're much more your confidence levels are
Yeah.
significantly higher, that individual is going to be a hard worker and come in, get on with people, and in fact they're going to probably have a lot of leadership skills in there, as well as a lot of that maybe technical background. If you're working in the signals or the engineers or whatever it happens to be, there's a lot of transferable skills there with I suppose the right certifications on your CV will get you through for an interview. And I would be a big advocate for helping people. And I know whenever you leave the military, you have your funding to reskill and you do your certifications, and it's just about getting those key certifications that employers are looking for, depending on what
Yeah.
area you're wanting to go into, and then applying for it. Because I think particularly in our industry, it's an undertapped use of resources that we have. And again, because we're the best kept secret, service management. People in the military don't leave and think, I'm going to go into service management. Again, it's not one of those go-to industries, but in fact, it's a real. There's so many skills there that can be taken across both, and I think we need to do more in that area as well. for sure.
Well, so let's say I'm someone in the army.
Yeah,
I'm leaving. I'm coming out. I kind of know I want to go into IT, but I don't know my areas of specialization.
yeah.
Do I need to know an area of specialization, or can you? Is there like programs which you run, for example, where they can maybe, I suppose, try before you buy, go into different areas, like in a grad scheme where you try different
Yeah.
roles. Yeah, do you have anything like that at all at BT?
Probably not so formal as that, to be honest. But we definitely have what we call liaison officers, with, the career leavers of the military who can help guide, them in the right direction, and guide them to where maybe the roles are posted. But what we would definitely look at your CV is, it's trying to put it into normal language. And I think a lot of people, when they leave the military, they struggle to articulate what they have done in the military in the right way, on their CVs. And maybe now,
Yeah,
maybe more with chat GPT and the like, it'll become a bit easier for people, to do that. Because what they don't really see as transferable. But if you write it in the right way, and I would encourage them to get somebody who has worked in civilian street, as we call it, for a long time, get them to look at your CV, get them to read it as if they're our employer, and get them to rework it with the individuals. And I think, depending on their skill set, and typically they'll know if they're more of technical or not, but, like having your ITIL 4 foundation, like having maybe your Prince 2, maybe having, if you're more technical, your CCNA or your Comp T, whatever it is, having those certs are really
yeah,
important to getting you to have an interview. So the best will in the world, having the experience is one thing, but if you've got a couple of certs and the experience, it will definitely get you through to that next to that interview stage, which is the all important bit, is getting to that interview. And then again, it's about getting help with that interview. Don't feel you can walk an interview, because again, people in the military have never had an interview in their whole life. They get
yeah,
promotion internally through, their reports and what have you. So again, speaking to somebody who does interview, speak to somebody, to do a prep interview for that is really, really important. There are a couple of different forms to know about, like VetNet and stuff, where there's jobs that are posted specifically for military, background.
hmm,
So they can go there and they can go and have a look at what roles are there. But it's actively, I suppose, doing those things that would help, and getting linked into groups like that would certainly help. And I know, as I say, a lot of the LinkedIn learning courses, and even your My Campuses and different things like that, they give a lot of discount for people that are leaving the military. And
hmm,
equally, the community of practice and ITSMF, you get your discount. I think it's only £50 or £60 maybe for a whole year, and then you get access to all of the learning there, their community of practice there. And again, you can build your network as part of that, and you can reach out and ask for help and support that way as well. So there's lots of different, I suppose, ways and means to do that. But just to try and actively encourage people to think about this industry, and whether it's the process, whether it's more leadership, whether it's more technical, whether it's maybe more cyber, they're probably our project management, they're probably your key sort of 4 or 5 areas that you would be pointing people to. Because as you leave the military, like, I wouldn't necessarily point someone to the service desk, mainly because when you leave the military, you're on a good salary, like a really good salary. So
yeah,
it depends. It's not really a like for like. As part of that,
hmm,
you want to more point them to those other roles I said there. To try and get them more of a balance from a salary point of view as well. So yeah, it's
yeah. No,
tricky. It's
definitely,
hard for people.
100%.
Mm,
Yeah, really, really hard. And you mentioned interviews, and I think that'd be probably an area where some of them might struggle with it, because, like you say,
mm.
they haven't had to interview for forever. Would you say that, let's say you was interviewing someone, would you be a little bit more flexible, knowing that they've come from a military type background, and giving them a little bit more grace in an interview, or not necessarily so?
So personally, me, I would, because I'm
You
obviously
would,
from that background. Would everyone
yeah,
do that? I don't think you could rely on that from everybody. I don't. And I think part of that is, I suppose, having the fairness of the interview, that way, and people come and perform. Um, so I think you've got to go in expecting there not to be that grace and favour, and therefore you need to be prepared, to do a good interview as part of that.
yeah,
And I guess everyone's different and every candidate's different. You might have, 2 candidates and you take a punt on one, but if you have 10 candidates and one person who really doesn't do a good interview versus 4 or 5 others who do really great interviews, you're going to go to the ones who do the great interviews to be honest. I know for more the technical roles, there's a few more hands-on practical, more around the knowledge and experience for the job, as more so maybe the interview, and they would weight them accordingly. But I would say, as an individual, you wouldn't want to go in with that mindset. You'd want to go in with, I'm prepared, I've done my prep, I've spoken to other people. I always say, if you're going for an interview and it's a promotion, and let's say that promotion's worth 5 grand to you or whatever amount of money, how much work do you do for 5 grand? Well, that's the amount of
Yeah.
work you need to put in for an interview. Do you know?
Yeah.
It's not just walk in and hope you can wing it.
That's a good way. That's a good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
is it 2 months work? Well, then you need to put 2 months work in practicing for interview. And if you did
yeah,
that, I tell you what, people would walk interviews. Preparation's so important, for interviews. And I think doing mock interviews, because you think you know what's going to come out of your mouth. You think you know, but until you're
yeah,
actually saying it, you don't know. And getting that story right and run it by other people is really important.
yeah. I agree with you. Okay, all right. Look, we're coming to the end of the podcast now. I suppose
Hmm.
I kind of want to end it on just finding out from you, like, do you see any like massive changes in the kind of ITSM type area? What does that look like? Any challenges, and what does the future look like? And do you see it different, over the next 5 to 10 years to where it is today? I know we touched on XLAs earlier
Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah.
but anything else like that that's worth mentioning?
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? And you sort of think 5 or 10 years ago, have I seen massive changes from 10 years ago to today?
Yeah.
I would say the answer is no. I've seen changes, but I haven't seen massive changes. Now, do I think in 10 years' time there'll be bigger changes? I think there will, and I think it is based on the rate of the automation, as part of that. I do think that's going to impact, hopefully in a good way, right? And I think more and more skills are going to be acquired more in that DevOps, in terms of, and even data
Mm,
analytics as well. So what do we do with that data? How do we get the machine to work for us? As I was, how do you finesse things? How do you exploit, the tools that we've got to make it work best for the customer? I can
yeah.
definitely see skills in those areas really starting to push a little bit harder. I think topics like your mental health, your gender, your diversity, are very much going to be here to stay. They're not going to go away. And hopefully they'll become more BAU, where we
Hmm.
become a society that, all of the best practices and the best policies and the best, support for those individuals, will be the norm in 5 to 10 years' time. And I can definitely start to see trends coming in on sustainability, that sort of the greener side of IT. We're starting to see that come through quite a bit in bids, and as we were talking about earlier on, that experience too, so whether it's your XLA, whether it's your digital experience. But I think for me that's just us progressing to create a better customer improvement. And again, 10 years
Yeah.
ago we'd have said the same thing. It's just called something different now, in
Yeah.
my view, and it's maybe a wee bit different, but it's not dynamically different. But ultimately I still think in 10 years we're going to have a service desk, we're going to have our techies, we're going to have, the ITIL functions, we're going to have the need for service design, the need for project management. Like, I don't see that going away. In fact, if anything, I think in the managed service world and the service management world, I think it's going to grow, because I think now more and more companies don't want to have the responsibility for
Mm,
their IT, and particularly with cyber and security and all the threats that we know there are at the minute, and the risks are so high for companies to do that on their own, with maybe a much smaller IT department with single point of failures and all of that going on. I actually think the move to more managed services and bigger responsibility being put on a provider is going to be more, and I can see the demand getting more for that type of activity in the next 5 to 10 years. That would be my prediction for it, I think.
it's good. I agree that there'll still be service desks. There'll still everything will still
Mm.
be there, right? But I think, like you said earlier on, I think automation will,
Yeah.
yeah, make the biggest, not biggest change, but make lives a bit easier. But I'm finding with a lot of my clients actually that they are outsourcing their IT operations out much
Hmm.
more now. Yeah,
Mm.
like I say, they don't want that. They don't want that responsibility. They
Yep.
don't want to give it to someone like you at
Exactly.
BT. Yeah, for you to have that responsibility.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Look, you've been a fantastic guest. It's been lovely having you on. Any kind of like last thoughts from you before we kind of close off for the day?
Just well, thanks very much, as I say, for having me. I love doing things like this. But just to encourage people, to keep doing what you're doing. The fact you're listening to this sort of podcast, I think, speaks volumes. And I always say, if you execute really well in your job, you do a really great job. I always
Yeah.
think getting on well with your boss is really important. So have that really good relationship with your boss, and then doing things outside of the day job, whether that be in work or outside of work, really helps to shape your career. And have that mindset of doing those three things really well, then
Hmm.
hopefully your career will flourish. So yeah, hopefully.
Good. Good takeaways. Thank you very much. Well, listen, thanks again, and we hope to have you on in the future.
No problem. Thanks, Can.
Right. I'll see you soon.
Cheerio.
Bye bye.